There is a specific vulnerability that sets in when you walk home alone late at night. The streets are empty, the street lights flicker, and your senses heighten to pick up any slight variation in the environment. For our narrator, that variation begins as a small sound, a soft drag, like thick cloth brushing the pavement, trailing directly behind them. This animated diagram mapping two parallel audio waveforms illustrates why this sound registers as an immediate threat. The top line shows the sharp, consistent pulse of a human walking gait. The bottom line overlaying it represents the anomaly, a long, asymmetrical drag that completely fails to align with normal footfalls. The brain instantly recognizes the mismatch. Instead of turning around to identify the source, the narrator chooses to simply walk faster. They try to outpace the sound, keeping their eyes firmly locked forward. The human flight response frequently defaults to this exact strategy. We prioritize blind, forward momentum because the physical act of running away is easier to process than the psychological cost of turning around and verifying the danger. Reaching the front door changes the equation. The narrator rushes inside, slamming and locking the deadbolt behind them to cut off the pursuit. Looking at this 2D architectural floor plan, we can see how the mind constructs an illusion of safety. We treat the perimeter walls and that locked front door as an impenetrable boundary, believing that engaging a lock physically severs our connection to external terrors. To maximize this feeling, the narrator retreats to the deepest, most isolated layer of that defense, the enclosed bedroom. They turn off the lights and lie down, fully trusting the architecture to protect them. Then minutes later, the slow, dragging sound returns. But it is no longer out on the street. It is inside the locked room. A physical lock requires a physical intruder to stop it. When a threat ignores the structural rules of a building entirely, those barriers lose all utility. The encounter escalates from a purely auditory experience to a tactile invasion. The dragging sound moves slowly across the floor, stopping right next to the bed. Something touches the edge of the mattress. It starts soft, then presses down with a heavy, pulling weight that causes the bed to dip near the narrator's feet. That weight shifts. It pulls itself upward, dragging slowly from the feet, along the legs, until it settles directly onto the narrator's chest. This chart maps a biological defense mechanism known as tonic immobility. The rapidly spiking line represents the subject's heart rate surging in the presence of extreme fear, while the flat-lined metric below it shows a complete shutdown of motor function. The body involuntarily paralyzes itself. Trapped beneath the entity, the narrator shuts their eyes tight and actively feigns sleep. They desperately reason that if they withhold any reaction, the intruder will lose interest and leave. The decision to feign sleep turns the body into a cage. While the narrator waits for the intruder to lose interest, they have effectively removed themselves as a barrier to whatever the entity plans to do next. Hovering heavily over the narrator's chest, the entity finally breaks the silence. It leans in close and whispers, "You didn't look. You never do." The entity's focus is on the act of looking away. Each time the narrator chose to keep their back turned or their eyes shut, the proximity of the dragging sound increased. By refusing to look, the narrator provides the exact conditions the entity requires. This pattern of avoidance allows the intruder to move from the street, through locked doors, and onto the victim's chest. Before retreating, the presence delivers a final ultimatum. Next time, look. The entity does not overpower the narrator with supernatural strength. Its presence is entirely sustained by the victim's deliberate refusal to acknowledge it. Instantly, the weight vanishes, the dragging stops, and silence returns to the room. After lying entirely still for a long time, the narrator slowly opens their eyes to survey the space. There is no one there. A wave of relief follows. They sit up, breathing hard, believing the intruder has departed simply because the room is quiet again. This transition from extreme pressure to total silence creates a deceptive sense of resolution. Without a sound to track, the mind defaults to the assumption the threat has been removed. Then, looking down at the floor, the narrator spots physical evidence left behind: a thick, dark, continuous smudge mark. The dragged line traces all the way back to the bedroom door, proving the entity bypassed the locked threshold without ever opening it. As we follow the dark, continuous smudge mark in this video, the path takes an unnatural turn. It leaves the floor and climbs steadily up the vertical surface of the textured bedroom wall. The track does not stop at the corner. It continues across the ceiling, coming to an abrupt halt directly above where the narrator sleeps. The entity has not left the apartment. It has simply moved to a position that sits permanently outside the narrator's line of sight. Refusing to confront an unknown terror does not simply banish it. It merely invites the threat to cross your boundaries, find your blind spot, and wait patiently above you.